Hello and welcome back, lovely fiction authors. So today we're going to talk about the very common, very well used in our space phrase, kill your darlings. Basically, what this refers to, if you don't know, is just cutting out parts of the story that are not relevant, and it's historically something that's really difficult for authors because we love our stories, right? They're our babies, and we have a really hard time, especially when we're getting started out, being able to edit ruthlessly. But that's basically what it's saying. Your darlings are the parts of the story you love, and it's saying kill your darlings, edit ruthlessly. But should you actually do that? I'm actually not a huge fan of the way that this is most often taught, and I'm going to tell you why. But the question is, should you kill your darlings? When should you kill them? Why should you kill them? And is there any way to get around killing them? That is the subject of our podcast today. We're going to deep dive into this, so stay tuned. Okay, so kill your darlings. I had to look this up because I wasn't sure who originally coined the phrase. I know that Stephen King popularized it in his memoir on writing, but according to our buddy Google and the AI, it's often attributed to William Faulkner, but it had already been expressed earlier by Arthur. Oh, I'm gonna kill this last name. It's either Quiller Couch or it might be Queer Couch. Anyway. He said murder one's darlings, so he phrased it a little bit differently, but you get the idea. All right, so like I said, I am not a huge fan of this. It kind of depends on the situation. I think that people teach it across the board, and they really shouldn't. So there are definitely cases where it is relevant and appropriate, but I want to invite you to take a little more time before just ruthlessly killing your darlings and look at a few different aspects and a few different details. Now, before I dive into that, the reason that this even came up for me and I decided to do an episode on this is that I was doing a coaching call with the lovely Kelsey Moore, who is writing her first book, and she asked me about this. She said that she had workshopped some of her first draft with an editor who had told her to cut certain parts of the story that she had written that she didn't really want to cut. And so I started talking to her about this. I'm going to go ahead, with her permission, and play a small clip of the coaching call that we were on so that you can hear her question and my answer. And then after that, I will come back and we will deep dive into it. So here's that clip.
And
Yeah.
it's interesting because sometimes it's like the editor feedback where she'll be like, I mean, I know everybody talks about like the sloggy middle or whatever
Mm-hmm.
and stuff, and she's like, this is slow. You could even cut this, and everyone talks about killing their darlings and whatever the phrase is and stuff. And so some of that, I wonder, I'm like, am I just attached to it because it's one of my darlings, or is it like a different opinion, a different perspective?
Right.
And some
Right.
of that's tricky because I'm
It
like,
is.
the stuff in the books that I read that I love the most, that I savor, that like I think is what makes it memorable, and
Mm-hmm.
makes me want to read it again, is like the cute gooey middle where it's not the yeah, it's like the descriptions of the place, and it's like you just getting to live and exist in the world in
Mm-hmm.
between the big scary things happening. Like those are the
Right.
moments that I cherish. And so
Mm-hmm.
I like can't tell yet. It's like, is that just perspective, like different readership, or is it like, no, I need to just cut it? And I don't know. Yeah.
So, okay, so here's what I would recommend for that. The first thing always is going to be relevancy. If it's relevant to the story, especially to the theme, the ending, the climactic moment where you're going with it, then always keep it. I understand you're talking about descriptions, which may not specifically play into the plot, but if living in the world and understanding the world of the story is important, then keep it. Now, it could be that, one of two things. Well, except it kind of comes down to the same thing. Of course, you're always going to have some people that just don't resonate with your writing, and that's normal. But what I find is that if somebody thinks that it's slow and could be cut, they're not having enough of an emotional reaction to it. So that doesn't, I'm not actually a huge fan of killing your darlings unless it's something that is completely irrelevant to the story. And then it's like, okay, yeah, you were just off on a tangent having fun, but if it has no bearing on the story, then get rid of it. But if you had an emotional reaction to something, this is what I always tell my students. If you have an emotional reaction to something so much that you want it in your story, there's a reason for that. So you need to connect it, be intentional about connecting it more deeply to your story so that you can make it relevant, even if it's not yet. You know what I mean?
I see what you mean. Yeah.
And then the other thing is you might just need to describe it a little bit better so that they are having an emotional reaction to it. It could be that you just haven't quite hit on the right words yet to make them be invested in it, but you can fix that too. So I would just always ask, is it relevant? If it is, then find a way to keep it, either make it relevant or put more emotion into your description so that people are feeling the warm fuzzies about it the same way that you are.
Yeah. Oh, that makes so much sense. Thank you. That was very clarifying. That's really helpful. Because I think about it and I'm like, there's the reasons why I want to have it in there and the purpose and the meaning behind it and truly the relevancy. Okay, thank you. I think I can definitely just make it like more emotive, create extra buy-in.
Okay, and thank you so much, Kelsey, for allowing me to play that clip on the podcast today. So, as you heard me say, I'm not always a huge fan of just jumping straight into killing your darlings, and let me explain why in a little more detail here. The reason that people say you should kill your darlings is specifically that they may not be relevant to the story. So they're saying if they are not really integrally relevant to the ending, to where you're going, to the character change, all of that, then you need to kill them off. In other words, get rid of them. And I actually do agree with that. If there is literally zero relevance to the story and it has nothing to do with anything and it was just you going off on a tangent, then yeah, you really need to get rid of them. They're not helping your story. I always harp on about a focused story, a cohesive story, right? And going off on tangents like that, even though you love what you're writing, you will end up losing your reader doing that, okay? And it's going to make your story clunky and unfocused, and obviously we don't want any of those things. The other thing is that it actually does or can take away from the emotion too, which is another thing that's a big no-no, right? But here's the thing. I want you to think about everything I've said so far. The reason that everybody tells you to kill your darlings is because they aren't relevant. So wouldn't it follow then that if they were relevant, you wouldn't need to kill them off? Now, I will say that I've kind of done this naturally in the past, and if anything, it might have been an ego thing on my part. You know, I would be with my critique group, and they would tell me that they weren't really seeing the relevance of this particular thing to the story, and I think very often I was just being a little bit rebellious about it and going, you don't see the relevance, huh? Well, I'll just show you. And then I made it relevant so that they couldn't argue that. And it wasn't even so much just that I wanted to show them up or something. It was because I loved it and wanted to keep it in the story. So I made it relevant so that they couldn't argue that and I could keep it in the story. You see what I mean? But the thing is, it's of my opinion that you can make anything relevant. So the question is, what does it need to be relevant to? The biggest thing is just look at your ending, right? It has to do with the ending. Is it relevant to the character change? Is it relevant to the climactic scene? Is it relevant to the resolution, where you're heading with the story? Could you tie it into your theme? That's another big one. If you can tie it into the theme, probably nobody's going to really question why it's there. All right. So if you're looking at something, if you have someone telling you that you need to cut some part of your story, something you've written because it doesn't have a whole lot to do with the rest of the story and they think it's irrelevant, ask yourself, how can I make this relevant? Can I tie it in to the character change? How could I show character change in this part? How could I make this a part of the character change? How can I tie this into the climactic moment? Is there something in this scene or that I could add to this scene that will be important in the climactic moment so that I can't cut it? That will make your scene relevant. And the theme. I know that not everybody knows their theme when they get started, but if you're one of my students, you do. You figure out the theme pretty early on. And if you can somehow integrate that theme right toward that theme in that scene, and you guys, you can do this any way you can possibly think of. You can have something happen in the scene. You can have dialogue in the scene. You can have them learn new information in the scene. I mean, it doesn't matter. Just find some way to tie it to your overall story plan, right? So that it is relevant. So if we give this an example, like let's say that you're writing a scene that's just kind of fun and cute between characters, and, you know, as it stands, it doesn't have a whole lot to do with where you're going with the story, but you like it because it's heartwarming and it's like two characters getting to know one another. Well, I would argue, first of all, if the two characters getting to know one another is integral to the story, if their friendship is something that the story turns on or pivots on, then it's already relevant. You probably don't need to do much with it. But if not, if this is just kind of a side tangent, and the friendship isn't going to be terribly relevant to the story, but you still really love the scene, okay, well then when these two characters are together and they're bonding, can they learn some information that's going to be important? Can something happen that's going to push the main character into a decision that's eventually going to lead to what happens in the climactic moment? Can you look at your theme and say, how can I integrate the theme into what's going on here so that the scene is somehow symbolically illustrative of the theme? You see what I mean? If you can do that, if you really can't think of any way to do it and it's completely impossible, then yeah, you're going to have to cut it because it's weighing your story down and making it clunky. But the instant you make it relevant, it's not doing that anymore. Okay, so my point is you have every power and control over your story, over what goes in, obviously over what you take out, but it's not just a matter of if it's irrelevant, there's nothing I can do, I have to cut it. Okay, and that's what I mean when I say I don't necessarily agree with how Kill Your Darlings is often taught, because that's generally what people say and how they teach it. They just want you to be really ruthless in your editing. And, you know, so it's like said with an exclamation point, kill your darlings, just do it. And in terms of relevancy, again, I don't disagree if it's absolutely irrelevant, but this does not take into account your own creativity within your story. It does not take into account that you know your story, your characters, your theme, and where everything's going better than anyone else does. So you have the power to, I mean, imagine all of those things, your theme and your end game for the story being like little vines, and they weave in and out of the scenes, tying everything all together. All you got to do is make a little offshoot of that vine to weave through this extra scene that they want you to cut and pull it into the main story. And then it's not irrelevant anymore and you don't have to kill it off. Okay? Now, the other thing that could possibly be a problem that you heard me and Kelsey talk about is that maybe, I mean, very often you'll have a scene that it won't show its relevance right away. So, you know, we do that in my group sometimes. Like if somebody says, we're not really sure where this is going, we'll say, okay, give me 1 or 2 more chapters, you will see it is relevant. And usually we trust each other pretty well. Oh, okay, yeah, we'll just wait and we'll see and we'll come back to it, you know, because sometimes we're in the middle of unfolding a story and we only go a chapter at a time in our critique group. So we give each other some grace for that. And then once we do see how it's relevant, then we can go back and say, okay, you might want to throw this in earlier on so that it's more obvious to the reader, that sort of thing. So if you have a scene that you know is going to become relevant, but as the reader or the editor is reading it, they're just not really feeling what the relevance is yet, a big part of the problem, I promise you, is that they are not having a very big emotional reaction to the scene. You got to understand, I harp on this all the time, you've heard me say it a million times, emotion is what draws the reader in. It's why they're there to read. So even, this is probably neither here nor there and not the best thing for me to say, but I would almost suggest that even if it's not relevant to the story, if it's emotional enough, it's not going to matter. It does matter. Like I said, that's probably not the best thing for me, a story coach, to say, because obviously it does matter overall to the story structure. But if you can get the reader to have an emotional reaction to something, they're not going to be asking about relevance. They're not going to care because they had an emotional reaction to that scene, right? So you could throw like a little kid into the scene that isn't really relevant to the rest of the story, but if he is just so dang cute and the way he interacts with your characters is just so adorable and heartwarming, no one's going to be asking you to cut this kid out of the book, right? Because it's just cute and they're having an emotional reaction to it. You see what I mean? So my point is, maybe this is a problem with your writing. And even though I know that can be frustrating and nobody wants to hear that, the good thing about it, the positive thing about it, is that it's very fixable. All right. So maybe you are not making that scene emotional enough, right? Maybe you need more emotional sentences. Maybe you need more descriptors. Maybe you need more reader triggers in that scene, okay, to make someone really read it and have an emotional reaction to it. Because on the flip side, think of it this way. You may have a scene that is just all kinds of relevant to your plot and to your character change and where it's going, and you cannot take that scene out of the book because that's the whole crux of everything, and the whole book hinges on that scene. But you can still write it in a way that's boring, right? And that the reader, you're losing your reader because it's not well written. Okay, so it goes both ways. You may also have a scene that is so well written that everybody has an emotional reaction to it, but in the end, it's not terribly relevant. You see what I mean? So you need to check on both things. You need to check to see if whoever it is, your editor or your beta readers or your critique group, whoever, if they're asking you to cut something, number one, ask if it's relevant. And if not, how can you make it relevant? Okay, if you say, no, it is already relevant, I've already got information in there, I cannot take out the scene, then you need to ask why they're not liking it. What could you do to make them have a heavier emotional reaction to it? Do you need the plots to be, or the plot events to be a little more triggering? Can you write it with more emotion in the sentences using more emotional words and phrases? Do you just need to give them more of the character's thoughts and feelings and motivations? Can you put some physical sensations into your description so that they are experiencing the scene with all five senses? All of these things will make it more emotional and more fun to read, and then they're less likely to tell you it's a little blah and you need to cut it. See what I mean? So here's what you need to do. I'll give you the full sequence here. If someone is asking you to kill your darlings and you really, really, really want to keep them, first, number one, ask, is it relevant? And be really honest with yourself. You need to consider whether this is leading to the climactic moment, the character change, and whether it's relevant to your theme. And by relevant, is there something in that scene that illustrates one of those or leads to them directly, or that you cannot do without in your story? Okay, as long as there is something like that, then it is relevant. If there's not, then the next step number two, can you make it relevant? Can you put something in there? Big or small, it doesn't have to be rewrite the whole scene. Put something in there to make it relevant. If you can do that, then you're good. You're golden. Okay, and after that, or assuming that it is already relevant, then maybe the problem is that you are not creating an emotional enough scene and your writing is not emotional enough. So can you put more thoughts, feelings, and motivations in it? Can you write more emotional sentences with emotionally charged words and phrases? Does the scene itself maybe need to have more of a trigger in it? And what I mean by that is, if there's not much happening in the scene, if you just like the descriptions and to be able to show off your world building a little bit or something like that, okay, maybe something needs to happen in the scene. So the scene turns, so that they get new information, so that a new relationship is established, so that, these are what reader triggers are. They really pull the reader into the scene based on what's happening there. And usually they're based really, really heavily on emotion. So put something like that into your scene. And immediately, if it becomes emotional enough, I mean, you can't really entirely gauge the relevance of a scene until you've read the whole book and you know where it's going. But if you're writing something that is deeply emotional, that is drawing in the reader, whether that's a reader or a beta reader or an editor, they're not going to be asking nearly as much what or whether this is relevant or why it is in there, right? And here I'm going to give you one more bonus tip before we quit for today. You can always try to do some foreshadowing. Put just a little bit of mystery or a little bit of intrigue in it. Ask a question that goes unanswered, or have the character make an observation that is a little strange and you don't know what that's about. Readers, even though they may or may not be entirely conscious of it, are very intuitive when it comes to story. So if you just put in a question without an answer that maybe one of your characters ask, they're going to immediately know that that's important to the story. Make sure the question is important to the story. Don't just throw in a random question you're never going to answer or anything. But if you put in a question like that, they're immediately and intuitively going to feel like this is relevant to the story and you're going to answer that question later. Boom. They're not worrying anymore about whether the scene is relevant because you've put some foreshadowing in. Okay? And you're sort of leading them by the nose through the scene toward the answer to that question. Okay, so that's another way you could do it. And that, again, would automatically make the scene more relevant. Okay, so I just wanted to go over that and explain how to do it. Should you kill your darlings? Only if they're completely irrelevant. When should you kill them? Only when you cannot make them relevant. How should you kill them? Well, pretty much just have to cut them out if you are going to kill them. But you might also find that there are some that you could kill or parts of them that you could kill, but then you could leave other parts in because they are relevant. And honestly, those parts are going to probably be the best parts anyway. So you have to gauge this and figure out what's going to work best for your story. All right. All right. That's all I have for you today, guys. Happy Thanksgiving tomorrow to everybody in the States and anybody who celebrates it. I will actually be doing some Thanksgiving prep and cooking today, so I hope everyone has a wonderful holiday as we head into the end of the year and the Christmas holidays. And I will be back next week, same time, same place. Thanks for joining me today, guys. Happy writing.